Morning, everybody. We've been in the shutdown an awful long time, and I hope we'll be able to get out of this soon. I know everybody's going stir crazy, and I hope everybody's feeling good and doing your homework and stuff like that at home. I have all kinds of stories, but I'm going to tell you another one that the earliest I can remember is when I was 3 years old, and I was in a 1940-something car with a bunch of people in there, and I was sitting in the back. I wasn't sitting in the back seat. I was in the well where your feet go, and we were all going up to the lake. And on the back of the car, they had an open trailer, and there were a ton of people on the trailer. When we went up to a cottage or a lake house, we went with a bunch of people. So I remember there was 3 miles to Twin Lakes, and I was very excited. And it was so long, the longest 3 miles I've ever rode, and we finally got there. I loved the lake. I couldn't wait to get in it. And years ago, they didn't have rubber rafts or anything like that. They had a tube from a tire, because they didn't have every tire had to have a tube in it in order to blow the tire up. You needed a tube. So when you got an old tube, you could put patches on it that you take it out and blow it up, and you could use it to go in the water. So I was 3, and I'd get inside the tube, and I'd run out into the water and go all over the place and everything like that. And I just was having a great time. My dad was walking out on the lake, and he sees this body down underneath the water. That was me. I lost my inner tube, and I was down in the bottom of the lake. But it wasn't real deep, but I could. That's where he found me. Pulled me up. I don't know how long I was under, but he saved me. Ever since then, my dad would rent a cottage every year on a lake. And as my sisters and we got older, my sisters would bring all their boyfriends up and everything like that. There were people all over the cottage, laying on the floors and everything like that. We always had a boat came with the cottage, a little rowboat, and I loved going out in the rowboat and things like that. And I would sit on the pier and watch all the motorboats go by and wish that I always had one. So that's when I fell in love with boats. So I started saving from my paper routes and any little jobs I had, and I got money, and I managed to save over $300. So my dad said one day, he said, well, I'm going to go out and let's buy a boat. Give me all your money. So I gave him the $300, and he went out. And I told him exactly what I wanted. I wanted a round bottom boat and something fast, at least 12 feet long, things like that. He wasn't going to, it was going to be a rowboat, or, it was going to be a boat. We didn't have a motor or anything. So he comes back after a few hours, and it was everything I didn't want him to buy. He bought a flat bottom rowboat, handmade. It was a pretty nice boat, though, after a few times out on the water and things like that. So now we were going to do a maiden voyage. My dad said if he got, if he would go in with me on the motor. So we got a 7.5 horsepower Johnson, 1957, I think it was. and we put it on the back of the boat, and we went up to my uncle's cottage, and he was on Wonder Lake in Illinois, and we launched the boat, and I was really excited. I started the motor, and I was going out, and my dad was sitting in the very front seat, and a big boat came in front of us and had a giant wave, a wake. And I yelled to my dad, "Hey, Dad, watch out!" And he was smoking his cigarette as usual, and he had his big hat on, and well, we went up. I went right into the wave, and the boat went way up in the air, and came crashing down. He was sitting in the front seat, broke the seat, fell onto the floor. He was a little upset with me, and all the way back with the boat, he's telling me well, you're supposed to go on an angle with the wave so you don't hit it, so it's easier on the boat and everything. That wave would have went right over the boat. That's how big it was. So that was my first. My dad eventually bought a cottage on the Fox River up in Wisconsin. It was called Waterford, Wisconsin was the town. It was a nice cottage, and the river was really cool. You could ride for miles on the river, and there were a few lakes along the way that you could go into. And a boat came with the cottage, a little round bottom, and I bought a 25 horsepower Johnson, and we'd water ski and everything on that little boat. It was only 12 feet long, but we had a great time. My dad couldn't swim or anything, but he tried water skiing one time. And I was on the shore watching, and the boat was going, and he never got up, but he was underneath the water. He was underneath the water. Finally, we got our nicest boat we ever had, and it was a Century inboard. A guy just fiberglassed it and everything like that. It was originally all wood boat, one of them real fancy boats. It had an inboard engine, and it had 2 seats all the way across, so 6 people could actually sit in it. It looked like a car, and it was an inboard, so the propeller was underneath the boat. It wasn't an outboard motor. And we painted it all black. And at the bottom of the boat, we painted gold. It was a beautiful boat. And in the front of the boat, I put a big skeleton flag. And the river wasn't really big, and this boat was almost 20 feet long, but it threw a giant wave. It looked like a PT boat when it was going. And I remember one day my dad was going out for a ride, and I was on the pier watching, and he was driving down and people hated us on the river because when we were out in the boat, everybody would take their boats in, and because the waves were so big and everything like that. Well, one day he's driving along, having a good time, and all these guys are fishing, but he didn't realize he was pulling in all their fishing rods as he was going down the lake. They were screaming at him and yelling. Oh, it was funny. So since then, I wanted to instill in my kids about boats and everything. When we moved out to California, I sold all the boats I had when I was in Illinois. I remember the big misfortune. I was in college at the time, and my dad says, "Well, hey, we got to get rid of that boat. It's in the front of the cottage. I just want to get rid of it." I said, "Well, why don't you sell it, Dad?" I said, "You can have the first $25, and I'll have the rest. Whatever you want to sell it for is fine with me." So he goes, and he comes back and the next week, and he says, "Well, I sold your boat." I says, "Yeah, how much you get for it?" $25. So he just really wanted to get rid of it. So He had his $25 and I had zero. All right, I'm gonna expand more on what we did once we moved out to California, which was quite exciting. And I bought boats as we went along. So for now, that's about it. Thanks for tuning in. And we got something exciting for our activity this week. Thanks. Bye.